simply take back anything of value to the king. What old Henry had discovered was these places were repositories of not just silver and gold, but of real treasure. Tapestries, paintings, statuary, extremely valuable, and easily converted into cash. What are known as venerated gifts devoted to Christ become king's property. Well, the good folk, commoner and noblemen alike, were outraged at this, and many of them spoke up, criticizing the king, who met this kind of insubordination. Stiff penalty, death, by public execution, hanged on a gallows, burned at the stake, or simply being hunted down and murdered. Thus began what is known as the Recusant English history, from 1510 or thereabouts to 1590 or thereabouts, in which around 900 people died. Ever have a Bloody Mary? Mary, Queen of Scots, came along somewhere in this succession of royalty, and she had her fair share of kills. Suppressing public outcry with a brief trial in which only one opinion mattered. It was the law of the land back then, strictly enforced. Now, my great ancestor, Edward Wilcox, was one of the founding members of the Recusant movement. It runs in the family. Pension for justice. His father died on a gallows in the late 1580s. His father before him, we don't know his name, escaped capture for years, finally run down by horsemen in the late 1550s or so, beheaded. His legacy, and the legacy of the Recusant movement, was this out-of-the-box thinking for those days, that to vest all that military, state, and judicial power in one man, a king, or a queen for that matter, who then simply made the law with their lips, was a recipe for madness, megalomania, we call it today. And that the future of government had to be the dividing up of absolute power among men, trustworthy souls who were then answerable. The very people they go. Well, as you can see, this absurdity is considered high treason in this day. And Edward, true to form, could not let it go, and taught these strange, newfangled ideas behind closed doors, in secret circuits, by candlelight, until his arrest, 1618. He languished in prison until the summer of 1620. Good King James was on the throne now, who had tried to appease the disgruntled populace by commissioning the publication of an exquisite Bible, but it was not enough. Such feelings die hard. At last it came time for Edward to meet his fate, a dead man walking, treason against the king, dressed in rags and smelling like a fish that's been out of water for 4 or 5 days, and half starved. So in the midsummer of 1620, he appeared before the magistrate, leaned across the bench, and spoke. Behold, Edward, you have one of 3 choices here. Behind door number 1 is we simply take you outside and off with your head without any further ceremony. We put what remains in a cheap pine box and bury it in a pauper's grave, unmarked. and nobody knows whatever happened to you. How do you like those potatoes? Edward sneered back fiercely at this. The magistrate chuckled, amused. Continued. But door number 2 is worse, I think, Edward. You sign a confession, renouncing everything you ever believed in and swearing total allegiance to the king. We grant you a full pardon, and you go home today. In exchange for this magnanimous gift, we will expect back several large favors from you. In short, you'll have to rat out your friends and patrons, and they will swing on a gallows in your stead. How do you like those apples? Edward spat on the floor. The magistrate continued, amused. At door number 3 is exile, Edward. You've heard all this hubbub about the New World. Well, the king needs colonists, alive colonists. Your job, should you ever even make it there, you'll have less than a 1 in 10 chance of survival, if that, will be to simply send back anything that's worth money to the king. Between you and me, Edward, if you do not perish at sea, more likely you will perish in the wilderness. How does that sound? To which Edward replied, I'll take door number 3, Your Honor. He was immediately remanded into custody aboard the Mayflower. He sailed the following day on the afternoon tide. Thus, Edward Wilcox embarked upon the Mayflower. A little more than rags on his back, an empty belly. With no room below decks, he pitched himself a crude tent out of a piece of scrap canvas. Hugged the decks the entire trip, exposed to wind and rain and sun and salt, until at last, land ho! And the Mayflower dropped anchor. says Sawyer, a mid-level chief among the Iroquois nation, which at that time stretched from central Florida clear up to Maine. As he sat in regal splendor, surveying the scenes unfolding before him, he turned to his right-hand man. History does not record his name, so I have simply named him Joe. Joe, said Chief Master Sawyer. Well, yes, Chief, said Joe. Did you ever see anything like this in all your born days? No, Chief, said Joe. The two of them sat in silence for a while, studying out the whole kit and caboodle. Until at last, Chief Master Sawyer spoke again. Joe, said Chief Master Sawyer. Yes, Chief, said Joe.
That's fine. Thank you.
Got any ideas? Well, Chief, said Joe thoughtfully. Obviously, no wisdom of the elders will apply here. And there's no time to seek counsel. We're on our own.